You just referenced a little bit ago the idea of being a professional reincarnator, and you also referenced in the previous conversation the concept of not having to wait until death to die. Can you talk a little bit more? I'm fascinated by the concept of reincarnation in general, and of course, it's not every day I have the chance to talk to a professional reincarnator. So, can you tell me a little bit more what you mean when you say that? And I think you did. Like I said, you spent a few minutes on it before, but I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, why not? Well, it really blows past a lot of I would say, the concepts about the transmigration process. Like, how much control do we really have over our next experience? And also, if we came into this life not knowing anything about our previous lives, unless maybe we're regressed or, you start remembering things, is it going to be the same way next time? And so these are some of the major questions that I had. And, it kind of got a little depressing for a while, because I would be like, why am I having these experiences, even with family and those kind of things, if I'm not going to remember any of this later? I mean, what's the whole point?
Yeah, right.
That's, of course, when you're taking it a little bit too serious. But hey, that's how it is, especially when you start brushing up against the spiritual world. You find out it's real, but yet you're living in a reality that the authorities don't even recognize it in that tense. And so that could get a little unnerving too. And that's a lot of the people that fill out the platform. So what I decided to do personally was keep going. Like, even now, I'm still challenged to keep going, even beyond what people are calling spirituality right now. And because either way, there's going to be something next, there's going to be something new. So we might as well get to it and not get complacent. But just in regards to what happens to me after this, I really did need to get more control over that situation, and also removing, like, I'm the Lord of my own life. I'm the master of self. So I don't have that same comfort that many people have, or sometimes false comfort, but hey, whatever it is, that, something's just going to come and scoop them up when this is all over with, whether it's in some spaceship or whether it's being caught up in a cloud and going to hang out with someone in, I guess, clouds that feel like cotton and streams of
playing the harp for eternity.
Right. Or maybe up there with Santa Claus. I'm not sure. But, I just wanted to be really much more in control of my next process. And so that's when I began to study a lot more about those who were always preparing for this life. And of course, you find a lot of that in the Eastern tradition, of course, with the lamas and with the monks, because I feel like, if you're sitting in this room all day and all year, and you've been doing this for 20 years, you have to know something. Now, that doesn't mean that occurs in every single case, because in many of those places, that's like a culture. So it's kind of the same way that we get up, go to school, whatever. It's just the monk life is the culture. So they're really just, very down to earth, very simple, and very loving people. But as far as if you go and try to hit them up with professional reincarnation and what the process is, they're not going to be schooled about that. But in many sects, though, that have allotted their citizens and denizens a lot of time to practice their spiritual standing, you find those who have breached beyond, and they've wrote about it and they talk about it. You just have to be available to listen and read between the lines. And what it talks about is that obviously one of the major goals here is to begin to grow your spirit and to have your spirit become larger and larger. And you can obviously do that through meditation, and you can do that through experience. You can do that through many different things. Now, actually, some things also shrink the spirit. So when I'm also saying larger and larger, I'm not saying you need to get bigger and bigger. And in fact, everything's paradoxical. So it kind of has to do with being more collected and less divided. But we can say for the tense of how we need to understand it is getting the spirit bigger and larger. And then when you begin to do that, it actually has fuel to it. This prana kind of functions the same way as a fuselage lodge, or a fuselage lodge of fuel would be for a rocket ship. So the more of this that you have, the more you gain the ability to thrust into different spheres. And when you start doing this, it's professional. I guess the first term was a Time Lord in a certain tense, and then professional reincarnator is kind of like my own coined term. But you start to gain this ability to close the loop in time, and also to get to a point to where you feel comfortable with what is going to happen next, because you start running through these procedures. And And so there's a lot to it. This is like, if one of the classes, like say to become a doctor is 10 years, you can imagine how long a professional reincarnation course would be. It could be over lifetimes of, when the person finally starts figuring out, hey, maybe I need to get in control of this and take it off of autopilot. And because I did become aware in a very clear way that the reincarnation process is like an autopilot. It kicks in just as sure as when you get knocked out, you start breathing. Or sometimes the whole reason why you pass out is because you lose breath. The body turns off certain things and says, okay, let me just breathe because something's going wrong. So it has all of these hardwired fail safes, if you may, that kick in automatically. And that is one of those is the part of the reincarnation process. So in order to begin to tamper with that, if you may, just in using that term, if we begin to mess with that, what we find is that we have to kind of like, I guess, the word, I'll use cheater because cheater is an anagram for teacher. So you kind of have to cheat. It's like you don't actually go through the same process that everyone goes through when they die. You find out a way to not leave a signature. And how you do that is you're not as surprised about it as most people are when they're experiencing that. It's because it's like taking maybe DMT or ayahuasca or whatever for the first time. I mean, you go through this process and then it's just so overwhelming. And then you realize that you're over your head rather fast, especially if this is your first time. But, if you've gone in several times, you could do this through breathing. You can do this through many ways. There's different ways of discovering that this is a matrix. And in certain tenses, when you start to get more familiar with it, then you're able to stop the whole reaction part and almost leave no signature. And this is the way that it becomes easy to get out of the body because the body doesn't activate to hold the being inside the body, and then there becomes somewhat of a struggle between the spirit and the flesh. And so these are some of the onsets. I'm just giving some just key points here, but the whole concept in itself which is really beyond a concept. I don't actually like the word. I just have to find a new word. But the whole thing is really steering into how do you actually begin to remove your spirit from your body, but that's just a larger part of the spirit while still keeping a certain amount of your spirit still in your body so that it can function. And, this may seem like a part of science fiction, but it's actually not. This is ancient knowledge. And again, a big part of that is growing the spirit so large that when you take a part of it, out of the body doesn't have a problem with functioning. But this new consciousness that the rest of your consciousness, if you may, can actually travel. Now, this is something that I believe personally that we're all doing, but because of the inability to send fuel, if you may, into all of those variations of ourselves, we kind of get stuck into this one particular reality that we're in until we every now and then let go when we dream. And then when we dream, because it shuts off a lot of that equipment that I was telling you about before, that kind of kicks in even the reincarnation process, we drift. And then when we drift, we're actually in a different space.